Mr. Pettus, it is so nice to see you again 20 years later. Tell me what happened on the night of the April 29th, 1992.
Well, the city was ablaze. I owned Payless Market at 57th and Western. And from that point, we were looking for ways. We called 911. We had no response. Line was busy. All the fire trucks were being dispatched to other locations. And we had to do the next best thing to try to put the fire out. And so we did whatever we could to put the fire out.
And there was a fire hydrant that was running. Who opened the fire hydrant?
I'm not sure how the fire hydrant was open, but we used that water to to toss over into Ace Glass to protect their property because we knew we were next door and we'd be the next in line to be burned.
Do you know who set ablaze the building next door?
I have no idea. Everybody was running. There was a liquor store across the street that started on fire, and everywhere you look, fire after fire started that evening.
How were you able to protect your market?
Since I had worked for the gas company, I shut the gas off at Ace Glass Company so it wouldn't be an explosion, and then we used the water from the fire hydrant and from the bucket to put the water on Ace Glass Company, which was next door.
How did you prevent looters from coming into your shop?
We stayed. A lot of merchants left, but we stayed for 3 days there at the place. And no one came to confront any owner who stayed at the property. They only went into places where no one was there.
I see. Now it's been 20 years since the riots. Do you think there will be another riot like that in LA again?
I hope not. So many families were hurt, so many businesses were hurt, and some places have not recovered even 20 years later. So I would pray that there would not be another riot.
What do you think caused people to cause such harm to businesses all around you?
Well, it was a feeling of hopelessness. They were not satisfied with the verdict that happened during that period of time. And it was like there was a sense of hopelessness that they were like, what can we do? And they took measures in a different route. But a lot of people lost a lot of money. A lot of business couldn't return. Even if they rebuilt the structures, the city of Los Angeles would let them come back with a beer license or liquor license. And a lot of these merchants had paid over $250,000 for their licenses. So a lot of people are really hurt by that riot. A lot of merchants went out of business because they couldn't make it just selling dry groceries in the area.
Any thoughts about how the neighborhood has changed since the riots?
There has been some rebuilding, but it's hard to rebuild. Some people just, even the merchants, some of them just gave up because they lost their life savings. I mean, for most businesses, you have to have most of your capital raised yourself, and there's not a lot of loans for businesses. So a lot of these merchants in the area have put their life savings, and some just lost everything behind the riots. They lost the building, they lost the business, they lost the merchandise, a place to stay, because if they aren't generating any income, then they lost their homes behind it. And so many people lost so much during that period.
As far as the LAPD's response to the riots, how do you think they could have done differently or better?
Well, I'm sure they were caught off guard. The media interviewed several police officers. They had them down at 54th and Van Ness, which was the Metro bus station. And they were under instructions, do not leave this area. And a lot of the officers were saying, we need to be on the streets. But their commanding officer says, no, you're not going on the streets. And the media really hurt a lot of business because we kept hearing on the news say, hey, we're at Florence and Normandy and there's no police in sight. So once that word started being publicized on national television, more people came out to start looting and things like that. And so it was very destructive what the media did as far as announcing that alarms aren't being answered, the police are not responding, and it just really snowballed from that point.
Do you think LAPD had ability to handle it? Had they come out, or
They had the ability to handle it, but they were also, from what I saw on television, when they had them, they did the interview with the police officers, and a lot of the police officers were crying and said, "We need to be on the streets," but they had instructions not to leave the metro station on 54th and Van Ness. Had they been allowed to do their job, a lot of lives, a lot of property would have been saved, and therefore a lot of lives would have been salvaged. Because once you take a man's business, then you take his livelihood, then you take his home, and a way for him to, provide for his family.
Why do you think Korean American business were especially targeted so much?
I don't think they were targeted. I think it was just because they were just a local merchant. A lot of businesses were, I was in an area to where you just had more Korean merchants that had grocery markets. That's just who owned most grocery markets in the area. I don't think it was so much a targeting. There were furniture stores, there were all type of places that were being vandalized because of the irresponsible media saying there's no police in sight. Alarms are not being answered. The fire department was overwhelmed by all the calls. I was 3 blocks away from the fire station, and I kept seeing all the fire trucks being dispatched other places. At the same time, they had instructions of which fires to go to, and so it was just total chaos.
Are things better now?
In some ways, there has been some things that have been rebuilt, but there are still vacant lots in a lot of part of Los Angeles, especially South Los Angeles, that have never been rebuilt, and in 20 years, because I'm sure there's been a lot of people who were afraid to go into business, to put in $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 into a business, and then not be comfortable that they would reap their return on the business. It takes a lot of money to go into a business. And so people probably say, well, we'll either relocate or do something else. But a lot of people just, some places that were burned have never been rebuilt in 20 years. And that's really a tragedy.
Thank you very much.
Beautiful.